Well, thank you everyone for joining. As you all know, this is the Stimson Center webinar we've organized to discuss early warning systems in the cryosphere and the related challenges. We have a few more just joining us, but I wanted to start off by introducing myself and my co-moderator Jakob Steiner in just a second. To back up just a bit, this event is something we dreamed up about a month ago. We're very happy to have previous to a couple of even more recent events that make this discussion even more pertinent. We've got an incredible group of experts from around the world, as we've said in our advertisements for this event, that's representing academia, the private sector, an intergovernmental organization based in Kathmandu. The type of problems we'll discuss today are relevant to all kinds of different locations around the world. And the type of hazard interactions that we'll discuss and the systems that the questions of design that relate to these type of hazards we'll discuss are really cutting edge, in the sense that we're learning every day and in every event that happens about potential solutions, and also learning more about the questions. So my name is Austin Lord. I'm a senior fellow in the Energy, Water, and Sustainability program at the Stimson Center. We've been working in Nepal, particularly on our project on cascading hazards and early warning systems, beginning in 2023, based on a report we conducted in 2022. When the Blatten event happened, which was sort of the catalyst for this multi-sided event and trying to truly create a conversation that spans international case studies, we thought that it was, again, this was a timely discussion. These are similar processes to the type of things that we're looking for and monitoring in our own program. I'll leave you to look up our program on the side. There are plenty of links on the Stimson website, but we're trying to build tools and systems that can enable monitoring to support early warning systems in Nepal and hopefully in other places in the future. As we all know, there's a couple of big ideas. Climate risk is increasing in the mountains. There are lots of different events. There are different patterns. Every event that set, the different hazard cascades that shape each event have different properties, and they're not all similarly easy to identify or follow or track. And the topic of conversation for today, moving from monitoring to early warning systems, is quite difficult. And that's a big point we want to bring home in our conversations today, is that there is a difference between monitoring systems and generating early warning that's effective. And hopefully that's even people-centered, which is, I know, something we'll discuss today. And we wanted to unpack that space a bit in this conversation. This conversation is, in response to Blatten, which was sort of another wake-up call. This is the type of event, the glacial detachment and collapse that occurred in Blatten, is the kind of thing you can monitor. And there was particular types of monitoring, which we'll hear about today, that enabled a bit more of an anticipatory action, evacuation. That's not always the case. Successful early warning is not always the case. And when the questions and the complexity of potential hazard cascades is even higher, as it is in the Himalayas and other parts of high mountain Asia, it's difficult to understand exactly what a system might need to look like. So I just want to flag that this question today is about what might be possible and what might work in different settings. We'll see from our panelists the lessons that we can take away from Blatten and other case studies and how we can apply them in other places in the Himalaya. I just want to make one more sort of global connection. In the wake of the flash floods that occurred in Texas and the Guadalupe River recently in the United States, this has brought up several questions about early warning systems, the decision-making process, and the governance questions that go into when you decide when to actually build a functioning early warning system, where to monitor, how exactly to set this up, what kind of modalities, what kind of tools do you use. So we think that this conversation today is relevant in a broader sense. The United States certainly does not have everything figured out when it comes to early warning systems. Rapid onset extreme events have occurred everywhere in the world recently, almost, and we're learning again from every event as they happen. So our goal is to explore and clarify the differences between the different systems that we're discussing today, and to see how they can apply elsewhere. The last thing is just, this is a socio-technical issue. This is a very technical webinar, hopefully not too deeply technical that we lose the audience, but we're going to be talking about technical systems and installation. However, if you're creating a people-centered early warning system or a community-based early warning system, or whatever your appropriate term is, there's there's a number of additional efforts one needs to make to take the technical alerts and the technological innovations that enable those and make them relevant to people and communicate risk and orchestrate action or coordinate action. So with that, I'm going to pivot over to and this is something all of our panelists I think will address at different levels. But with that, I'll pivot over to my co-moderator, Jakob Steiner, who has worked with us at the Stimson Center for a while as a consultant. He's currently a fellow at the Himalayan University Consortium and a postdoc at the University of Graz, well known across the world of cryosphere science in different ways, and has recently worked as part of the collective High Risk that worked on the Rasua Lende floods, which occurred recently. There's also something I think we'll discuss today. We may discuss further in future webinars. But with that, I'll say this panel focuses on the state of the art and the tools, but it'll also discuss social issues, and that's where I'm happy for all of our participants who Jakob will introduce, and particularly Jakob, who can help us frame some of these questions. So Jakob, over to you.
Thank you, Austin, so much. And also from my side, welcome to all of you. I'm very happy that so many of you have joined. There's still people trickling in actually as we speak. As Austin has already indicated, this summer so far, or rather the monsoon season in South Asia, has been very, very intense in terms of temperatures and resulting mass flow hazard events in mountains. So next to my day job or our day job as scientists, we also keep track of these evolving mountain hazard events in the region, right? And we provide early rapid assessments, as Austin has pointed out right now, for an event between China and Nepal to local stakeholders so they can make a bit sense of it, what is happening, what the associated risks are. And we could hardly keep up with events happening all the way between Kyrgyzstan and Nepal, all over the place. Some of them with very successful success stories of early warning actually as well. Some of them less successful and with very devastating impacts. And this is still going on. Actually, last night I was very busy compiling still a report on another mass flow event that obliterated the village with about 50 houses in the Karakoram. So this is ongoing. I'm very excited that, and of course we have seen the same in elsewhere, in Texas, but on also mountain regions in the Alps as well. And I'm very excited that we can bring together experts from different mountain regions to discuss this today, to exchange experiences. And like Austin has mentioned, perhaps this is a first step for further discussions in the future. I think this exchange between the different regions with different capacities and different challenges as well is very, very crucial. So how this is set up today, there's going to be a bit more focused presentation at the very beginning, which will be then followed by a panel discussion, right? So I'm very, very happy that we are joined today by Simon Elm. So I'll introduce the panelists first. So I'll come from the back. We are joined by Dr. Simon Elm, who is a senior research associate affiliated to the University of Zurich and University of Geneva, who has really vast experience working in the Himalayas and elsewhere. And some of you may be familiar with his writing on very specific events as well, related to Kedarnath, for example, in 2013, and more regional transboundary risk assessments in the region. Right? We are also joined by Dr. Wei Yang, who is an associate professor at the Institute of Tibetan Plateau Research in Beijing. He actually just told us before that he has just returned back from Lhasa in Tibet from fieldwork, and luckily could make it for this event today. He has wide research experience on the cryosphere and the Tibetan Plateau, specifically though also with early warning infrastructure. And finally, on the panel, we are joined by Ms. Vinu Shrestha, who is a remote sensing and geoinformations analyst at EasyMod in Kathmandu in Nepal. And she has been working on multiple publications, especially related to glacial lakes and associated floods in Himalaya. We will hear from all of those experts in the panel discussion afterwards. But I now would like to really move to the first point, the main point in the event. I'd like to introduce Dr. Maxence Carrel. He is the head of monitoring solutions at a Swiss company called GeoPrevent. He has a wide experience in everything from planning to deploying early warning solutions in Switzerland as well as elsewhere. And we are really looking to hear from his insights and from his company's insights and from his experience to then get the discussion in the panel and hopefully also from you to get that started. So yeah, thanks again to all of you in different time zones for joining us, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and the presentation. Maxence, the floor would be yours. And I would invite you to start sharing your presentation. We'll be around. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Austin and Jakob. I hope you can see my screen. And if you do, then I will start. So my name is Maxence Carrel. I'm head of customer solutions at GeoPrevent, a company based in Switzerland. And basically at GeoPrevent, we develop, install, and operate monitoring systems for natural gravitational hazards. So our mission is to detect, to protect. And this is something that we've been doing for about 15 years. So I have here a slide with some actual and previous collaborators. We are a team of motivated physicists, engineers, IT specialists that do build those kind of systems. And today I would like to introduce 3 different projects in the cryosphere, some things we did in Bondo, Simplon, and Blatten. What I would like to state here is all these projects are results of a team effort. Some of the people who were heavily involved on those projects are not here anymore, and some of these projects happened when I was not working at this company. And because of that, I would like to thank my team from the beginning on, and this is all the result of a team effort. And first, we monitor natural gravitative hazards, and with this we mean slope instabilities in rockfall, debris flows, floods, glaciers, landslides, rockfall barriers, glacial lakes, or avalanches. And we do that with different kind of technologies, but we are more focused on radar systems, so Doppler radar, interferometric radar, and level radars. But we also use different kind of cameras, crack meters, geophones, or seismic sensors, multi-motion sensors. And we gather all this data, forward it or upload it to our server, and from there on it's available to our partners and customers on an online data portal. And we have historically been working a lot in Switzerland, in Europe, in Scandinavia, but also in Northern and Southern America. And we've had a few projects in China and India and New Zealand. So we have a worldwide presence. Basically one of the big distinctions that we make at GeoPrevent, and this is a bit maybe oversimplistic, but we make a distinction between warning or early warning systems and alarm systems. And for us, this is really key because for warning systems, you're gathering data that are related to a precursory signs of an impending event, and you still have time to react. You have time to interpret the data, to maybe come up with different scenarios, different kind of actions that you can take to protect population infrastructure. And we also work with alarm systems. And in this case, you don't have this time. So you really have something that is, a system that is monitoring a slope in every second, and you need to be able to react super fast. And in this case, you need to be able to take automatic actions to trigger an alarm on a construction site, to close a road, or something like that. And basically, we really make this distinction, and I think it's very important to make this distinction, or in our perspective, because the requirements in terms of hardware, in terms of availability, of redundancy, are completely different. So this is a very strong distinction that we make, and I wanted to state that before going further a bit into the different projects that I would like to present you. So the first project is what we did in Valbondaska in 2017. So it's a valley that is located on the southeastern part of Switzerland at the border to Italy. And basically, there was a massive rock avalanche there in August 2017. So I let you see the images on the left. You have this video that many of you have maybe already seen. And then on the right, we have 2 images before and after this rock avalanche of circa 3 million cubic meters that came down from Pizzegalo and that landed on the glacier that is located below. And basically, this event caused several debris flows that devastated the valley and the village below. And so here we have one example of one of these debris flows that one of our alarm systems detected successfully. And basically, several events were detected, but the first event was in August 2017. And it had like devastating consequences for the valley below. And the first event was detected by a debris flow alarm station that was located a few hundred meters above the village, and with only a reaction time of circa 2 minutes. And this system was completely destroyed by the event that you just saw. And after that, we rebuilt 2 different stations. So one that was located a bit higher to gain some lead time, and also like an interferometric radar was installed in order to monitor the piste Chengalo and to ensure that there was no further instabilities in the slope. And then the alarm system for the debris flows were connected with the traffic lights that were located below in the valley, and also with an alarm horns that allows to evacuate the population or alarm the population. And basically, this whole monitoring system is monitoring continuously, and it relies on low power sensor and on a low power infrastructure. So you have the sensor themselves, but you also have a redundant way of transmitting the data with radio, with 4G, and all of that is powered with fuel cell, with batteries, with solar panels, or with power mains when we have power mains. But we have an entire infrastructure, if you want, that is here available to support those different sensors. And one of the important sensors that we installed after the event of August 2017 was an interferometric radar. And this is a very interesting and powerful system that allows for continuous millimeter deformation measurement at quite long distances. So here we are like a distance of circa 2 kilometers from the radar to the slope, but we can really work up until 5 kilometers and on large areas. And this is the big advantage of this system. So you can really cover fairly large areas, and you can measure in all weathers. So it's really independent of visibility. So be it day or night, fog or snowfall, you can really measure in all conditions. And here, in this case, we had an energy self-sufficient power supply with fuel cell and solar panels. So this system could work all year long and ensure that the local authorities could know what is going on in the slope and if there is any kind of acceleration on the unstable slopes that there were there. And this is the kind of data that you get here. So we developed several kind of algorithms allowing to interpret the data that the system records. And some of the algorithms allow to detect really easily very fast movements, but some other ones allow to detect, deformations of the order of millimeters over time periods of months to years. So it's really a powerful system to, on a large surface, as we see here, be able to see what is moving, basically. And here we have an example of the debris flow alarm station with level radars that are located on the top of those cableways. And basically, they measure a distance between the sensor and the riverbed. And in case of abrupt change of this distance, we can trigger an alarm. And these systems are coupled with cameras, weather stations, seismic sensors in some cases. And they can have a fuel cell or different kind of power supply. And we, in this case, had for this project, we had 2 different stations in order to have enough lead time in order to protect the village. And one other project that I would like to show is something that is a bit more recent. It happened last year on the Simplon. So the Simplon Pass in Switzerland is it's a road, so it's also on the border to Italy, but it's a very important road that leads from Switzerland to Italy. And it's very important because it's one of the only roads in the Alps that has no tunnel. So it means that a lot of, of potentially dangerous goods are transported over this road because they cannot go through the roads or on the train if there is a tunnel. And what happened there is that there's a block glacier, so that we see here on the left, that is melting and releasing a lot of material that got mobilized after some high precipitation event in June last year, and they kind of filled a shed that we see here below. So this shed was completely filled with this material, and you see it here, it really went over it, and there was a lot of material that was there. And the problem with this shed is that it is, all these galleries, that it is a snow, like it is protecting the road against avalanches and not rockfall. And this glacier is also releasing a lot of massive blocks that could potentially damage the existing galleries or this existing shed, and it had to be renovated after this event. So we had to, in emergency, install a system allowing to understand what was going on the glacier on one side, so on the top, and on the other side, be able to close the road to protect road users from potential events, but also to alarm construction workers and allow them to evacuate the construction site in case of an event. And for this, we set up a system with 2 different stations. So a station at the top of the mountain, top of the slope, close to the glacier, with a warning system, with different cameras, with the weather stations, GNSS sensors. And at the lower station, we installed the Doppler radar, some level radar, some trigger lines, cameras, and also sirens and lights to alarm the construction workers, and some traffic lights to close the road. And basically, here you see a time lapse of about 3 months last summer of the material moving on the glacier. These images were acquired by one of our systems that we see here on the left of the slide. We have several cameras and a pluviometer allowing to send some warning in case of important precipitation measured. So a whole infrastructure, so that one system among some others. And with these images, we can perform some correlation analysis to see there's an acceleration of the glacier. We can generate some time series. And then in the valley, when there are some events, or in order to protect against debris flows, we have level radars and trigger lines. And this is how it looks like. Basically, this level radar allows to detect events like this one. So this is on a global scale, this is a small debris flow, but if you are locally in an excavator, like removing some material from the shed, then you are happy to be alarmed fairly rapidly in order to be able to evacuate. So this system allowed to detect events like this. And one other system one of the components of this alarm system there was a rockfall radar that allows to detect rockfall events. And as you see here on the left, we have a model of the Doppler radar data that is projected on the map. And on the right, you see a corresponding rockfall event. So basically, this system allows to scan the whole slope every second. And within a few seconds, it can see if there is something that is moving or not. And then you can also trigger an alarm and evacuate a construction site if there's a big boulder that is coming down the slope. And this is a site where we have a lot of activity. So basically, this is data from this year. On the left, we have the daily activity, and the cumulative activity on the right. And we see that basically we have some events with more than 60, some days with more than 60 events per day. And up to now, like in the first part of the year, we have more than 2,000 events. And this is one of the events that we detect. So there's a massive block that is coming down the slope. We have 2 different regions of interest that we define. So when it is detecting in the upper one, we close the road. And if we do not detect anything in the lower one, we reopen the road. So it allows to fluidify the traffic. And you see that on that day, basically, we really had like a lot of events. So as the history of the day shows on the right. And this whole system is integrated on a data platform, and it allows for the users to be informed more or less in real time if something happened. They can be notified in case of detection. And then the road can be automatically reopened if the system sees that it was an event that was not that did not impact the road, basically. And I would like now to maybe dedicate a bit more time to what happened in Blatten on the 28th of May of this year. So you see here, basically one camera system that we installed on the day before the big rock avalanche happened. Some of my colleagues went there, and they had like boulders coming down the slope that we see at the back that were big like houses, and all the material that accumulated that originated from the Klein nest horn led to this massive rock or glacier collapse and rock avalanche, basically. And we had been working in the valley for some months. Another Swiss company had installed a camera close to the nest horn about 10 years ago, and we installed a camera system there in December 2024. And this basically the first camera that was installed showed, like at the beginning of May, that there was a small landslide that happened, and then it really showed that things seem to accelerate, basically. And upon that, we installed an interferometric radar in the valley on the 19th of May. So on the day on which Blatten was evacuated, our employees could, well, among the last who could enter the village, and install a system that could allow basically to monitor the whole situation, and then provide some key data to the local authorities in order to manage the situation. And we basically installed yesterday GPS systems in the remaining slope and the camera. So we are still working on that project and providing some equipment to the local authorities. But there's still some, because there's still something going on. So they still want to make sure that everything is okay. And maybe to start a bit with about Blatten. So there's this camera from another Swiss company that was installed about 10 years ago, and that allowed to record the images that you see here. And this is what our local geologists with whom we've been collaborating sent us around the 10th of May. And basically, we see this small landslide, and at first you just see, okay, there is a small landslide. It's nothing big. And then if you look a bit at the images, you see that the entire flank of the mountain is kind of moving and coming down. So that's something that was kind of really alerting, and that led to the evacuation of the village. And on the day the village was evacuated, we installed the interferometric radar that you see here. And this is the system that I also introduced previously, that allows to measure displacement between millimeter to 7 meters per day. It was installed on the day on which the valley was evacuated, and it allowed to measure the velocity of the front of the glacier. And this is the kind of data that the system could generate. So for us, as operator of this interferometric radar, it was kind of tricky because we had to react fairly fast. And we could not have a lot of time to calibrate the system. So, I mean, we drove away from the office in the morning, and we didn't know where to install it. And until we were on site 3 hours later, we had sorted those details. And then you need to perform some calibrations for this system. It's always important to correct for, or to be able to correct for atmospheric perturbation, to be able to know where there are stable regions in the slope. And in this case, this was not very easy. And this is also a valley with a lot of thermal wind. So the real-time calibration of the system was very challenging, but it provided good data as what we see here. And basically, on this picture, you really see that you have some zones with extremely high velocity. So we are really speaking about several meters per day. And for glacier, or also like in terms of landslide, these are really high velocities. So this is the data that was provided to the local authorities, and that helped them to manage the crisis basically. And now currently we are performing several post-processing steps to increase the data quality. But at the time when when the whole event happened, basically there was very few time available to do this, and because of that, we did not have optimal data quality, but it was enough, good enough to show that things were moving fast. And on the day before the collapse, we installed the camera that we saw before, because there was the need to be able to see the glacier from above. And with this system, we could acquire images at 15 minutes interval, or time interval. And basically, we suspect that there were glacier velocities above 10 meters per day, and we're still post-processing this data. But the glacier velocity was super high for glaciers. And on the 28th of May, there's this big collapse that happened. So as mentioned, the camera was installed on the day before the collapse happened. And here, basically, you see that we have 2 or 3 hours of images before the collapse happened. And these are images that were acquired at 15 minutes time interval. So this is really crazy. For the glass geologist among you, to see the velocity at which this glacier is moving is very, very impressive. And basically, this is the data that the local authorities got, and it really helped them to kind of deal with this situation. And that's how it looks after the rock avalanche happened. So basically, the entire glacier was gone, or maybe not the entire glacier, but a massive part of the glacier was gone, because of this rock avalanche. And this is all the valley looks now, more or less. So you have a lake that formed, and you really see like the village that was below is completely buried. Okay, so this was for Blatten, and I just have like a few other slides, because we So we are coming away from Switzerland. We're going east, way east. So we've had a few projects in India and China, and this is basically like some slides about a project we had in India. So we installed a system at Shakosho Glacial Lake last year to monitor this lake. So this system consists of several cameras, a weather station, and some pressure gauges, and it allows to really monitor what is happening with this lake. And the problem there is a GLOF, a glacial lake outbreak flood problem. And with the installed station, basically you have data about this. So this is some data from today morning with the actual pressure level and so on. And this allows to basically, yes, also like in another context to see what we can do with several systems like that. So that will be it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to state again that this is really like a team effort. So we have a great team at GeoPrevent that is performing this work. And I'd like to thank Jakob and Austin for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I just draw down here, right, Austin, before and then I pass it on to you again. And just, yeah, thanks so much, Maxence, for this very dense overview. I already see many questions in the chat, which lead us, I think, to what is coming now. Maxence has showed us a lot of potential solutions and technological solutions, and that's not always so easy. And well, I guess you could hear also from his story, it's not even in Switzerland that is easy. The story from going from Zurich to the site in 6 hours and having to make decisions on the drive there sounds like a lot of pressure. And I'm also happy that you kept that you managed to do the presentation on time under pressure. Much appreciated, because this leaves us a lot of time for the discussion that is coming now. And thanks so much. And over to you, Austin.
Thank you, Jakob, and thank you, Maxence. That was a tour de force of several important sites and approaches. I think what's clear is, that's a very in situ, bespoke approach to understanding specific problems, problem spaces or event areas, a constellation of sensors for a constellation of hazards. But that's the big question that drives this whole webinar, right? Is how do you take something like that and you adapt it and scale it up to look at a constellation of hazards that's operating at a different scale, or in a situation where not all variables are entirely known at the outset. Our next speaker, Dr. Simon Allen, who we've already introduced, has experience in a variety of different countries. He's, as Jakob intoned, well known for his work on Kedarnath, but he's worked several other places around the Himalayan region and the high mountain Asia as well, Central Asia. He's also worked in South America, which I hope he might touch on today. And he's currently part of the team for the, I should mention, the Asian Development Bank's BAR HKH project, looking at Nepal and Bhutan, and these types of hazards and protection of infrastructure as well in those areas. So we wanted to have Simon pivot, or help us pivot, from talking about these very specific case studies and systems that we see in Switzerland and other places. And this addresses some of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A about how do we expand this to other contexts. So Simon, over to you. And I'll just also say we have 185 participants, so we will have lots of questions. So if everybody keeps the time, then we'll have even more time for questions from our expert audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Can you just confirm you're seeing my slides?
Yes,
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it really is a privilege to be joining today, representing Geneva and Zurich universities. And what you're seeing on your screen here are these classic 4 components of an early warning system. And we've just seen a wonderful presentation really focusing on the monitoring and warning service part of that, the technical side. I do just want to take a bit of a step back, because a lot of our work is really in integrating that technical knowledge, working with experts like Maxine and local partners on the ground to actually integrate this technology into warning systems that really cross-cut and provide comprehensive and sustainable solutions. So I want to very briefly just touch on each of these 4 components and bring in some experience, some learnings that we have, particularly from high mountain Asia. And I'll say that we mainly have been focusing on glacial lake outburst flood early warning systems until now, but the learnings are cross-cutting. So firstly, in terms of the risk knowledge side of the early warning system, and I don't want to go into too much details here because this is a subject in itself. But I mean, it has to be said, of course, Switzerland has an advantage here. I mean, the starting point with all villages, all communities, having comprehensive hazard and risk mapping being undertaken for various mass movements means we kind of know where to start in terms of early warning system planning and in terms of evacuation planning, etc. This becomes an all different ball game when we are trying to decide where and how to design our systems in, for example, high mountain Asia, where the scenario-based hazard and risk assessment hasn't been done at any scale. So how do we actually prioritize? And what we tend to see, if I just reflect on glacial lake outburst floods, a lot of our monitoring, even going back a step, our modeling, but then the monitoring has been focused on these very large lakes, or the lakes that have been well documented, kind of the classic cases. Even though we are increasingly seeing that some of the biggest disasters are actually occurring from very small lakes, particularly when they invoke these cascading hazards, which can even be transboundary. So this is a modeling challenge on the one hand, and that's another whole discussion, but of course a challenge for the monitoring as well. How do we actually keep pace with these rapidly emerging threats? And you just see one example there from Kyrgyzstan, Akpai Lake in 2020. So you compare this to Blatten, where we've had 10 years of kind of knowing about a potential threat above the village. Here we have an entirely new hazardous situation developing in the space of 12 months. So how do we develop, how do we make use of INSAR technology, these kind of approaches to actually keep up with these rapidly emerging threats? And looking back now, I mean, this is actually quite a slow developing threat when we compare to what we've just seen in Tibet, these superglacial lakes that are actually developing on the scale of weeks. So this is a key challenge. And if we want to decide where to put our instruments, where to put our sensors, we need to know where these threats are emerging or will emerge in the future. But moving on to more the focus of today's discussion, so the monitoring and the warning service part of the EWS, so the technical component. As has already been stressed, one big challenge we've had in all the places we've worked is really balancing the needs and the expectations of monitoring from the early warning system itself. And I think I could say it quite clearly. I mean, to be monitoring or to have a comprehensive BLOF early warning system, we don't have to have instruments installed in every single glacial lake. We don't have to have instruments installed on all the glaciers. And perhaps in many instances, we can even say we could just ignore the glaciers, ignore the lakes, and put our instruments strategically located downstream, and we'd pick up any mass movement that's moving down that system. Of course, glaciologists don't like it if you say things like that, but it needs to be said, and it needs to be something that we discuss. And you see the example of South Lonak here, or of North Seacon, the example that was just presented. We were involved here in doing the underlying hazard and risk assessment. There, we compromised, of course. We focused on 2 high priority lakes that were important to local authorities, putting cameras, putting instruments at those lakes. That step has been done. But the broader early warning system itself will see, as you can see, a bunch of instruments, an array of instruments strategically located downstream that will still give sufficient warning time to the major settlements, but will actually capture events not only relating to those 2 lakes, but from any emerging threat in those upper catchments. And part of the rationale here is that the local agencies, the partners that we rely on to actually ensure the long-term ownership and maintenance of these systems, they have their existing mandates and they have their existing priorities. And if for them monitoring a glacier or having instruments in the lakes is important, then we go for such a system. Then we compromise and we need to have this integrated system. And you see even INSAR space-based monitoring included there to capture these emerging threats. I want to briefly touch on some of these other, I guess, the softer components of the warning system, but equally important if we want the technology actually to be useful. So in terms of the response capability side of things, this is all about ensuring institutions actually know their roles and responsibilities. You can follow along in the media yourself, the case of Blatten, what was said and who did what in terms of the canton authorities, the local authorities, etc. one of our roles moving forward is kind of transferring that knowledge to the different governance contexts where we work. I just want to briefly touch on Seacom again. So this is the image you see here of the Seacom disaster in 2023. There's a lot of learnings to be taken from that. There wasn't an early warning system in place. That's clear. There was a monitoring system in place, but not a warning system. But there were border authorities or a military camp located upstream, and they provided a warning that something was coming down the valley. And this enabled something like 1 hour or more, in which time there actually was a very effective evacuation and response procedure that took place. If we look at the size of that event, huge transboundary GLOF event, more than 25,000 buildings damaged. It's actually a testament to the response strategy that there were not several more hundreds of lives actually lost in that event. So certainly some lessons and learnings to be taken there. What we know is that authorities, Seacom authorities, had in this preceding years undertaken lots of mock drills, lots of training with local communities, not necessarily for GLOFs, but in this multi-hazard context, if you're developing response capacities for earthquakes or landslides, etc., this obviously has cross benefits then when a GLOF strikes. And we've been doing, you see photos there from some of our work in the Andes and more recently in Central Asia too, where we work closely with local communities. And lastly, in terms of the so-called last mile of the early warning system, so how do we actually ensure all this technology actually reaches the most vulnerable members of society? Again, the challenges are quite different if we're talking about a well-connected, well-resourced community here in Switzerland, alpine community, compared to a sort of remote, dispersed community somewhere in the Andes or the Himalaya. We know there's a lot of technological development in terms of apps and automatic alerting of GLOF events, for example, as you see here on the screen. Not only alerting that a GLOF has taken place, but actually guiding away to a safe location. But one of the challenges we have in almost all the regions we work is GSM coverage is not so good, definitely not in the case of an event happening, especially if it's triggered by an earthquake or something, where there may be systems are down. So we can't always rely on this kind of technology, and particularly the elderly and some of the marginalized members of communities won't have access to this technology. Another group I just want to finish by mentioning are the tourists. We often forget this group as one of the marginal or most vulnerable sectors. We can look back at 2013 at the Kiddernuff disaster. The vast majority of the many hundreds that were killed in that GLOF event were in fact holy pilgrims that were visiting the temple at Kiddernuff. With tourists, they're coming into the region, they don't have that lived experience, they may not be aware of the threats. So how do we ensure they get that knowledge? One of our early warning system sites in Kyrgyzstan, which we're in the process of implementing, that includes a populated or a popular national park. So one of the things we're doing there is actually taking a step back from the technology, going to the old-fashioned techniques, loudspeakers, sirens, etc., signage in place to actually inform when an event occurs. And the last thing I want to just touch on is not to forget the legal context here. You can have all the fancy apps, all the technology there is, but for example, in one of the communities in the Andes where we were working, there's one person, there's the village leader that actually has the legal authority to issue an evacuation. So these things have to be taken on board as well, and also the social aspects. Many cultures need to actually see with their own eyes that something's happening before they will act. So if the water hasn't changed color, if the flow's not looking differently, they won't evacuate and won't move. So just some aspects there I want to touch on as well. I think with that, I will leave it there. That's a bit of a snapshot of some of the challenges we need to consider and actually transferring or translating this technology into an operational early warning system, and happy to follow up with questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That was an excellent and sweeping overview. And for those of you who aren't familiar, he matched very closely to the 4 pillars of the UNDRR and WMO's early warning system. 4 pillars. On that note, there was actually a workshop in Kathmandu today organized by the government of Nepal's Department of Hydrology and Meteorology, which, to your point on legal and governance issues, is the mandated alerting authority for Nepal on Pillar 2, on observation and forecasting and systems such as we're discussing today. And it was a gaps analysis. The workshop was focused on gaps analysis, and some of the gaps that they mentioned also matched very closely, Simon, when you presented. Communication infrastructure is limited to enable monitoring and relaying information. Satellite data is not used enough was another thing they brought up, which we won't talk a lot about today, but as you probably all know, Stimson has a particular interest in that type of remote sensing. And then also that risk knowledge and forecasting means little if you don't have effective action coordinated, which gets back to risk roles and responsibilities for relevant institutions. That was an excellent overview, and we have made the pivot now. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jakob to set up some questions for Wei.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Austin. Yeah, without further ado, I would pass the floor to Professor Wei, and you could start sharing your slides. I cannot see your camera is now turned off, but yes, perfect, it's coming. We're especially interested here to hear from your experience on, in the very vast and complex environment of the Tibetan Plateau, and specifically with, of course, the efforts you've done in the Sedongpu site, which I think some of the processes also mirrors what we have seen in the presentation by Maxence. Dimensions are in the Tibetan Plateau are often a bit different than they are in the Alps. And yeah, we would also be interested to hear with technology for monitoring you see most promising for the region, right? Just keeping in mind this question, okay, what is possible in Europe, what is possible perhaps in a very different environment, like the Tibetan Plateau. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jacob. I just briefly introduce the early warning system of ice, rock, avalanche, and the river blockage in the southeast Tibet Plateau. As shown in this map, there are many ice, rock, avalanche on the Tibetan Plateau. In the southeast Tibetan Plateau, in the Sedongpu Valley, there are repeated ice, rock, avalanche during the past decade. In 2017, 2020, 19 and 18, and since 2023. So this is the location of the Sedongpu Glacier in the southeast Tibet Plateau. And you can see that the highest peak is the Jalabali peak. Its elevation is more than 7,000 meters above sea level. But the Brahmaputra River, the bottom of valley is about 2,800 meters. So there are large vertical distance for the ice rock avalanche. In the 2018, the ice rock avalanche has blocked the Brahmaputra River. So in under age of the road and the bridge in the 2018, and since the 2018, there are repeated ice rock avalanche in the Sedongpu Valley. There are more than 200 million cubic meter materials have collapsed from the ridge of this mountain. This is the digital elevation model shows the volume of ice rock avalanche during the past decade, and this video shows the ice the blocked ridge of the Brahmaputra River in the 2023, and there are some ice rock avalanche video. So consider the repeat ice avalanche. So we installed the early warning system since the 2019. We deployed 3 early warning system in the valley, in the outlet of the valley, and in the upper stream of the Brahmaputra River. We use the helicopter to carry all the material in this valley, because this is inaccessible by there's no road, and we also installed the early warning system in the valley and in the upstream of a small village. So this early warning system collects a data set of the optical and thermal video photos and the different waveform, water levels, and meteorological variables in this sparse populated room. And it's very pity in 2021, one of massive ice rock avalanche have destroyed our early warning system too. This is before that. This figure shows the picture before the ice avalanche. This is figures after ice avalanche. Our monitored system was completely destroyed by this massive ice rock avalanche and the debris flows. A massive flow from Sedong Basin overtopped the 200-meter high village in this basin outlet and destroying the early warning system and stripped the surrounding slope of vegetation. After 2021, we rebuilt another early warning system, including the GFN video and the meteorological station, and translated. This data was transferred by the satellite because there's no signal in this village. So this system successfully detected the 4 chain disaster involving ice, rocklands, debris flow, and river blockage. This you can see this is the thermal imaging before and after a river blockage, and we also use the G4 waveform to detect the ice avalanche, and the water level sensors to early warn the river blockage, and the optical images to capture the location and the magnitude of the ice avalanche. So a combination of the in situ, the GFN waves, the water levels, and the photographs can be used effectively to provide a warning about the occurrence and magnitude of the ice rock avalanche, especially for the GFN seismic waveform. If we compare the waveform generated by ice rock avalanche and by the earthquake on the November 10th, 2020, there are different waveforms between the ice rock avalanche and the this is the earthquake waveform. So we can use the GFN seismic signal to detect to warm the ice or rock avalanche in this village. But for the GFN, we should provide the threshold. So based on the repeat the ice rock avalanche, we define the threshold above the 20. So we can use this threshold to early warm the ice rock avalanche. We also use the 3-level threshold of 20, 25, and 30 centimeter per 10 minutes to for the water level warning. And we use the thermal images to detect the clouds extent on the high elevation. But there is a lot of ice cloud to prevent the detection of the cloud region. And we use the thermal images to detect the clouds. But there are still some challenges in this high remote region, especially installation and maintenance of the early warning system. Some places we should use helicopter, but it's a bit expensive. And the stability of data transmission by satellite and the power supply problem in the monsoon region is also very challenging in this monsoon region. And we should use the threshold for early warning signal like the seismic, meteorological, and water level for other regions. And as the last expert said, we maybe use the new instrument about Doppler ice avalanche radar or other new equipment to monitor for future monitoring this region. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Wei. And you know, for us, this was very helpful to see that this is not just what we heard in the first presentation. This is not just something that is possible in Switzerland, right? There are these highly complex setups that, like Simon has pointed out, are only one aspect of early warning systems overall are possible in high mountain Asia as well. And thank you very much for taking the time to show this example, which I think is one of the great case studies in the region that this is being attempted with extreme dimensions. I mean, what you have shown with was it more than 200 meters of overtopping of slopes is something that is quite scary to imagine. I have seen run-ups just after events that went up 50 meters and have taken away bridges that I would have never imagined to be taken away. But this is still another dimension yet. So thanks a lot for this, and I'll pass it on to Austin for introducing and the last panelist.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Professor. I think that was an excellent case of an evolving problem space where the system is also evolving over time. And you briefly mentioned calibration of localized thresholds, which I think is something we could, which is important, which is something we can also discuss in the Q&A. But I'd like to introduce Finnu Shrestha, who has already been introduced from ICIMOD, an expert who's worked across a number of different sites. The way we composed this panel, we wanted to have people from leading off with the private sector and heavy sort of tech installation questions and systems, moving through academia in different ways with Simon and Wei. Finnu works in an organization that is an intergovernmental organization that has a mandate for coordination and interesting types of has worked in a variety of different fascinating problems across the Hindu Kush Himalaya. So the way we picked speakers for this, right, is to represent different parts, different positionalities within the broader ecosystem of folks who are trying to solve this problem. I think ICIMOD is an important player. With that, I'll just hand over to Finnu, and just a question. How does an organization like ICIMOD try to support decision makers in the region? How are you thinking at the regional scale? What are your priorities, and what do you see as the biggest shortcomings? I think you have a couple of cases you'd like to discuss in Nepal and Bhutan, but over to you. Thank you, Finnu, for joining.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Austin. So, hello everyone. So I will be referring to mostly talking about the ICIMOD and what is ICIMOD and the mandate of the ICIMOD. So as Austin said, that ICIMOD is an intergovernmental organization working for 8 member countries across the Hindu Kush Himalaya, from Myanmar in the east to Afghanistan in the west. So ICIMOD mandate or the priority is to foster regional collaborations and also facilitate science policy dialogue and evidence-based decision making to address the mountain communities that is relevant to climate hazards. So talking about the cryosphere science or research in ICIMOD started this study in cryosphere science after the catastrophic Gulf events from Dikcho in 1985. So this event marked a turning point in understanding the magnitude of risks from unstable glacial lakes, and also motivate to do further research in the glacial lakes. So these events just motivate the technical team to develop a comprehensive glacier and the glacial lakes inventory. And this inventory also supported to identify potentially dangerous glacial lakes, particularly for Nepal and Bhutan. So the findings were consolidated into a technical report that served a critical reference document for the government and international partners involved in disaster risk reduction. So based on the scientific findings and recommendations, government implemented this risk mitigations for 2 lakes in Nepal, that is Imjacho and Chorolpa. So for both of these lakes, lake lowering mitigations were measured through controlled drainage and spillway constructions. So in both of these mitigation measures, early warning systems in the downstream for both lakes were installed that provides the alert notifications if there is any changes in the water level. And during these initiatives, local communities were equally or participated to from the technical designs to for maintaining early warning systems, and also they were trained or to evaluate the warning signals. And also they participate in the evacuations drill, as well as participate in the hazard awareness. And also like the relay the messages, also they were trained, like if in case of the mobile SMS or sirens or like the local communications, so they were all trained. So beside this, also ICIMOD also work with national and international partners in Choroba Glacier Lakes in 2020, and also independently work in the lower boreans to understand the physical dynamics of glacial lakes, and as well as to understand the hazard assessments up to like how much downstream, if there is any impact, how much impacts it cause in the downstream area. So beyond Nepal, ICIMOD also collaborated with the with the regional partners like Bhutan, Afghanistan, and as well as Pakistan. For instance, during this GLOF 2015 GLOF in Lemthangcho, ICIMOD supported government of Bhutan to conduct the post-disaster events, and also for Afghanistan's in 2018 events. So along with that, we also capacitated the government of Afghanistan to develop an inventory of glacier lakes and to monitor the most risk prioritized glacier lakes. So besides that, regarding talking about this establishing and maintaining the early warning system in the edge case, it requires both the technical designs and reliable, strong institutional collaborations. As a regional knowledge centers, ICIMOD contributes to the support of the global early warning for all initiatives by leveraging its technical expertise, promoting regional cooperations, and working closely with local communities. So we are generating and synthesizing scientific data that is on climate hazards like GLOF, landslides, as well as on extreme weathers that fills the significant gaps in the regions. And also through our partners and the projects, we also help to establish and improve hydrometeorological monitoring networks, satellite-based observation systems, and also developing tools. And we are also working with the national, regionals, and the local partners co-develop community-based flood early warning systems. So this is particularly between Nepal and India, ensuring that this risk information is accessible and understandable and actionable to those to the vulnerable people. So the shortcomings lies here is the significant transboundary challenges remain, because actually this is between Nepal and the Tibet, China, because there is no institutional coordination between governments. And also, but what we have also witnessed that although there are the instances of this local level communications or the cooperations, including this informal sharing of risk informations during the past GLOF, and also the sharing of this lake situation or the informations, but informally between the institute. But this still lacks this formalization and sustainability. So notably also there is no operational early warning systems in the upstream of Tibet, China that can communicate about the risk information to the downstream in Nepal. And this is clearly witnessed during the last July GLOF in Rasuagori. So this all prioritize that there should be the implementation mechanisms of this, and also to act to prevent such events. And beside this, we have to strengthen the resilience in these high-risk regions. So for this, we need the formal, so ICIMOD believes that there should be the formal transboundary collaborations for this framework, and also this joint EWS protocols should be developed. And there should be the investments in the data sharing, real-time monitoring, and also build the capacity of the local people so that they could take the responsibilities for maintaining and sustaining these early warning systems, and also build the institutional trust between this institution across the regions. And in addition to that, there should also be equally interest from the government, and also have strong this commitment to implementations of this EWS, and commitment to regional solidarity. So ICIMOD as a regional knowledge hub, we are facilitating or plays a crucial role as a hub or secretariat, bringing together these countries and members and local communities in one place to foster the collaborations and strengthen collective preparedness. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Finu. And yeah, agreed on almost all those points for the need for improved collaboration. And thank you for pointing out also some of the concrete mitigation mechanisms and trainings. That's part of the whole sort of broader value chain. We talked about the difference between monitoring, the early stages, scientific data collection, analysis, to early warning systems, alerts, alarms, even in the case of Maxence's work or others. But then there's also this ongoing maintenance that needs to occur, and that's both infrastructure maintenance, and that's also maintaining relations and conducting trainings and ensuring community buy-in, so to speak, and sense of ownership, as you mentioned, Finu. Also, thank you for bringing in the recent the Rasua and the floods in Rasua and the Lende Valley, originating in China in the Tibetan Autonomous Region. I think it's an excellent case study, as you know. The Simpson Center has written a little bit on this. ICIMOD has also been working closely with government in Nepal to enable and try to improve these improve and maybe formalize some of these informal networks of analysis and information sharing. I'll just wrap up by saying this is an important point that connects any early warning system project. Trust. You mentioned, institutional trust. I think that's critical. Trust in the context of, myself as an anthropologist working in some cases closely with local communities. Building trust, I've said this many times, trust is a process. It takes a long time. It's not just one, it has to be maintained. I know this is something that Simon has encountered in South America as well, and something we hear around the world. Trust and understanding roles and responsibilities as they change in response to awareness of new risks is really one of the key questions. With that, I want to expand outwards to the questions that have been coming in from our audience. Again, our audience is over 180 people at one point, so we have lots of questions in the Q&A. I think Jakob has a few we could start out with. Some of them are for all the panelists, some of them are specifically targeted. We'll start by going back, I think, Jakob, to one or two that were addressed early on to Maxence and Simon, and then we'll flow towards just a broader open conversation. And any panelists also, if you have additional contributions to make in response to a question that was not posed to you, please raise your hand and we'll let you come in whenever you'd like. Jakob, would you like to take a question or two?
Thanks, Austin, and also from my side, to all of those, I'm very grateful that so many people showed up. I'm aware that we are now getting into a little bit of overtime, and to all of those who have to leave, thanks for joining.
Just to clarify, everyone, we still have 22 minutes for questions.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have plenty of time. So keep your questions coming in if you have them.
But anyone who has to, I don't know, go cook dinner, look after kids, or answer emails, this event will also be recorded, right? So you will be able to rewatch whatever you may have missed and share it with others. There have been tons of questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address all of them. But please do stay in touch if you feel like we could not do justice to the question you have had. We try to club it together a little bit. There were a few questions, and I'll start with Maxence, who was the very first speaker. There were a few questions, not surprisingly, perhaps, and I know challenging to answer on costing, right? What is the scale in terms of financing of such kind of solutions? I think not so much on a so that Maxence would be to you, not so much on a specific number, but perhaps to give people a bit of an idea how this works, and together with the costs of such setups in Switzerland, also how is GeoPrevent as a private company mandated to then do monitoring in these cases? How does this work? How are you being pulled in? Maxence, if you can say something on that.
Yeah, very good. So to the second part of the question, so in Switzerland, the local authorities, they often or almost always work with external experts that have a consulting role and evaluate the situation and so on. And basically, for the case of Blatten, we had to work with a consulting company that we know very well. And because of that, everything went super smoothly. So we already had worked on the Simplon project together a year before. And so there's a clear role. The authorities are managing the whole thing, but they have like external companies that really do the day-to-day work and come up with ideas and suggestions. And we were kind of mandated by them. So this was a kind of easy. And at GeoPrevent, we try to provide good monitoring systems, but we make a clear cut and say, look, we try to come up with the best electronic solutions that we can, but we are not geologists, we are not glaciologists, so we really make this clear cut. And then concerning the price tag thing or the price tag question, those systems are quite expensive, and as soon as we speak of alarming systems, there we need to have some redundancy in terms of sensors, in terms of data transmission, power supply, and so on. So we are rapidly speaking of several $100,000s of dollars for systems like the one we installed altogether in Blatten over the years that we'll keep on monitoring the site. So the sums that are involved are quite high, and this makes this is not easily scalable, and this is a big problem.
Thanks so much. And then I see already more questions coming on in this, who is going to finance this also elsewhere. I think in the respect of time, and this would be is a difficult discussion. Always money everywhere, not just for early warning, right? Who is going to pay for it all? But yeah, thanks, Maximus, for giving perspective here. And so perhaps John Reynolds was just asking, do insurance companies contribute to any of the funding in Switzerland? Do you know anything on this, Maximus? Or are insurance companies involved already?
No, not no. Maybe at some later stages, but not that I know. So
okay, thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Just one side comment. The question of cost is a significant one. Many places are also, they have to make hard decisions between investing in the wake of a disaster, for example, in reconstruction and other types of sort of material interventions to mitigate or respond to an event that's already happened, or invest in an early warning system that looks to the future, that hopes to avoid and minimize loss and damage in the future. So if and when you have large-scale mechanisms for financing things like loss and damage, it's a fascinating question that gets mediated at every single scale. How do you balance between investments in systems that are focused on mitigating or avoiding future harms, or how do you invest in the demands of a community or a locality that has been damaged and wants restitution? So that's a chronic question. Even in places where I've seen in places in Nepal where there has been large-scale events, people often undervalue institutionally and personally at different scales, undervalue early warning systems until they realize they need it again, which is what happened in Texas, right? So I just wanted to make that connection. Jakob, you have one more question for the room?
Perhaps if I quickly segue here to so I don't know if Professor Wei, you can say something on the funding also for Zedongpu, right? Perhaps this was also a question here. Who is providing the funds for this, right? Is it coming from academia? Is it coming from science? Is it coming from the national bodies, and also the sustainability? I mean, it's quite hard to keep this system running in future, right? You showed examples where infrastructure was destroyed and you had to rebuild it. So this would be my first question. How is this? Can you give some idea on how this is done? And then there was a question specifically also for the Tibetan Plateau, that there is, of course, a lot of local knowledge already, right? The village that is just before Zedongpu, for example, has been previously impacted, right? So not just below Namche Barwa, but there was another flash flood there, or a glacier break off. I was wondering whether you can say something on including the experience of the population that is living with these hazards in your work.
Yes, Jacob. For the finance, for the installation of the early warning system, we get the foundation from the Chinese Academy of Science. But after the installation of the early warning system, the local government realized the importance of this early warning system. So we apply some project from the local government. They pay some money, and because this is very important for the local, for the infrastructure and the road and the electricity power station. So the local government provide some money for maintaining this early warning system in this region. Yes, it's very expensive for establish this early warning system in this very high elevation region. But for some other regions, I think we can use some very cheap sensors, like the water level sensors and the camera and the different seismic sensors. It's very cheap. The most expensive is the satellite transfer equipment and the battery and the solar panel system. So if we want to copy such kind of early warning systems to other regions like the South Himalaya, like the Central Asia, we can use some. Firstly maybe we can use some very cheap sensors, but very efficient way to monitor the debris flow, the avalanche, and the glacier lake outburst flood. That's my opinion.
Thanks so much. Yes, no, excellent points and hopeful points that it is indeed possible, right? I mean, Maxence was. I think it's great that Maxence has been emphasizing that it's not everything is scalable at some scale, right? You can. I mean, it's great to have dreams, but sometimes it's also irresponsible to dream to have the most expensive solutions everywhere. So I think that's very important to emphasize. But yeah, thanks also for pointing out that there are cheaper solutions which do help us to scale to some degree. And I would like to take this as a segue actually to a question for Simon. Saurabh has asked, which is very much a scaling question, right? So he has asked, okay, how do we narrow down on specific locations, right? High Mountain Asia has X number of valleys, far too many to even deploy them with cheap sensors. I mean, we logistically we cannot, even if the sensors are for free, we cannot go to all those valleys to monitor them. So how do we? And if a funding agency says, "Look, we only have that much money," how do we make sure that we go to the right places, kind of to do the monitoring and not lose sight of that needle in the haystack? If you can say something.
The question of triage.
Triage, exactly. Yeah, I would start from the bottom up. I mean, where is our infrastructure and our communities most at risk? I mean, what are we trying to reduce the risk to, basically? And then we look upstream from that, and we say, okay, what slopes do we have to monitor? I mean, what lakes are causing a problem for this community? I think it's tended to be the other way around. We select a catchment. We kind of do this large-scale risk assessment where we look for dangerous lakes, etc. And then we see what villages are being impacted, and then we go to those villages. That's kind of the last step of the chain. I would turn that around completely and triage by actually identifying who we need to reduce the risk to and what in terms of hydropower, etc.
That's a great, very succinct answer. It connects it. Something I've said in the past is whose uncertainties matter, right? And that what do you design to? What are the questions? What are the risks to whom that and uncertainties for whom that you're designing around? One question that also came up across a couple of different comments in questions here is also the question of climate change and specifically permafrost. This is obviously something that's in the background of many of these events. Attribution is complicated science, as we all know. There's different ways you can comment on the contributions or potential contributions of climate change to any given event. It takes time to give formal answers to those questions. But when we look at the gestalt, when we look at the overall picture, and we start to look at multiple events in multiple places and the rate of events. I read somewhere in the Sudangku area, for example, that the much higher concentration of events has occurred since 2017. Professor Wei, you were saying like 200 million cubic meters of different events has been mobilized in recent years. That's a lot. Any comments from the overall panel about impacts of climate change, specifically on the cryosphere? I mean, we're talking about mountain hazard cascades here. We're talking about, and a couple of the questions specifically have raised the question of permafrost, which I know is something that different institutions, including ICIMOD, have been looking at lately, and it's been a factor identified in some recent hazard cascades. So any thoughts from each of you on climate change and how it changes or increases the urgency of the need or different types of monitoring?
I can jump in first, but I don't want to take too long. I think when you look, I mean, it's always hard, and this came with Blatten. I mean, I know several of my colleagues the week after in the media were being asked exactly this question: what was this caused by climate change? It's always very hard to answer that in a black and white way, and yeah. But as you've said, I mean, the tendency when we look across the different global mountain regions is the tendency is there that these events, particularly these gravitational events, cascading processes are increasing in potential frequency and magnitude. And even if we can't point to exactly was this permafrost, was this glacial retreat, I mean, all these factors are combined. I mean, if you look at what climate change is doing, increasing rainfall, decreasing snow cover, retreating glaciers, permafrost degradation, none of these are really good news if you're a mountain slope. So it's kind of almost common sense that obviously with climate change, we expect these risks to increase. That's different from being able to say this exact event was actually caused by climate change. And I think that's a bit where we're stuck at the moment.
Any of our other speakers? Finu, I know that ICIMOD has mobilized all kinds of different campaigns, and Save Our Snow and others are really focusing on the risks to glaciers in particular this year. Anything else from Wei? Looks like you have something as well.
Yes, so after this Melanchik law, a lot of research or study ICIMOD has been doing on the cascading events. So we have also organized one hackathon that we invited the experts and the scientific team from the regions to do the research or combine projects on the cascading hazards. So we have a number of hazards we have considered for this, like the glove flood and landslides and also the cyclones. So we have considered everything. So cascading and how not only the cascading, but also we are researching about the compounding and the amplifying risks from that. So the team collaborate with the partner organizations and have been researching more on that. So through collaborative research, we are doing everything. And within a year also, we will come up with this research report.
Wei, did you have something you wanted to say? You're unmuted.
Yeah, in terms of climate change, on the Tibetan Plateau, most of the meteorological station is about below the 4,000 meter above sea level. We lack some record meteorological data above 5,000 meters, especially in the glaciarized region. In the glaciarized region, due to the local, there is a special glacier rose. The climate change may be different with the low elevation. So in recently, we Chinese Academy of Science and the Chinese government pay a lot of money to establish the high elevation AWS, automatic weather station, in the high elevation, even in the 8,000 meter in the Mountain Everest. So based on these stations, we can get the knowledge about the climate change in very high elevation, and then study their influence on the permafrost and the glaciers. So we hope more and more monitoring and operation in the high elevation to get the knowledge about the high elevation climate change. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, and similar problems are observed across other parts of Nepal, Himalaya, the HKH, high mountain Asia. I know this is something we've all looked at and talked about, the lack of high altitude or high elevation stations for weather monitoring. And I myself in Langtang, I've seen, to your point, Wei, which was commented on in the question and answer as well. I've seen monitoring stations also damaged in person myself in the Langtang Valley, taken out by snow avalanches, or Jakob and I, when we were up there with Walter Imrazil one time, tracking down the sensors that have been in place and dealing with the weather and high altitude and Himalayan environment for months. You come back and you don't know what you're going to find. So that's why redundancy, which has been mentioned by a few people here, and power backups, which has also been talked about in the Q&A, is important. Last thing I want to raise, and then we'll start to wrap up, is, several people have rightfully pointed out, we're talking a lot about in situ stations here, a constellation of sensors focused on a constellation of hazards in a particular basin. Many of the images that were shared are also fantastically useful. So thank you to all our presenters for that. It's come up a couple of times, but remote sensing also, because we don't quite know where to look at the beginning, using satellite observations, particularly different types of imagery. Few have talked about SAR, Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, other types of SAR, available SAR imagery have really changed their ability to monitor. So hopefully there's more complementarity going forward between using these systems to identify places of high risk, hopefully also engagement like what Simon mentioned, not just doing top down from space, but bottom up. I think having a complementary approach is critical to identify where to look. But that's how you get to the point where or you think about how and when a specific in situ system can be installed. That's when you call Maxence, or you apply for funding and you look to the government. Again, I think it's important that we've had these. I'm going to begin to wrap up, and I'll pass it to Jakob to close things down. But I think that it's important to have the different views we have in this room, in different positionalities, because everyone is looking at their own set of specific cases, and everyone is also trying their best to think about questions of scale, spatial and temporal scale. As we heard earlier in Simon's presentation also, there's a difference between looking at something that we've been watching for 10 years or 12 months or something we found out about last night. And that's going to continue to be a problem. And this type of collaboration is going to help us learn and adapt as quick as we can, because there are shared challenges. And I think this session highlights that very well, which is one of our goals. I think we've also learned about the process of how you set this up, which was also one of our goals. And I'll leave it to Jakob for a few minutes to give some final thoughts and close us down. And then I'll say one last thing, which is only a question came up about AI. We knew it would. Stimson is going to be organizing another event on AI, another webinar on AI and disaster science very soon. And it's something that's on the tip of everyone's tongue, and it relates to several of the remote sensing questions as well. But we will have more conversations, and this is our third webinar. We'll have more soon. So thanks. And Jakob, please help us close.
Thanks, Austin. And exactly in this direction, I think there are many unanswered questions. There would be a lot of potential to keep discussing, but we'll have these events coming up in future in different avenues, in different directions as well. So there is potential to keep the discussion going. Please be in touch. I think it will be possible to find our emails. We are not very secretive about it. If you're interested, and the interdisciplinary exchange is important. You probably heard this from the way that Austin speaks. He uses words like gestalt and positionality, which I, as an engineer, have to look up in the dictionary. This is, we enjoy very much working together, and that is something we believe is also important in these discussions, to have very different backgrounds in addressing these complex challenges. And then also have these discussions in webinars like this with many different backgrounds. We'll try to address this in future. We're very grateful that all of you have showed up today. Especially grateful, of course, to the panelists and the speakers to provide all your insight that has made this discussion possible. And we'll very much look forward to be in touch in future to try to find a better always improving solutions for these very, very complex challenges that we really haven't figured out yet, as you could see during the last 1.5 hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of our panelists and our speakers and all the participants one more time. We're looking forward to continued conversations and more questions to come. Thank you.